Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
How can you become a leader people trust and want to follow without losing your authenticity? Adam will share how kindness, psychological insight, and the power of thinking styles can transform you from an unsure manager to a confident, inspiring leader. Our guest today is Adam Kirkaldy from MindTime. Adam is a leadership trainer, facilitator, and creator of From Aspiring to Inspiring, a course designed to help new and emerging managers become confident, trusted leaders. With a rich background spanning opera singing, education, and international management training across the UK, Middle East, and Asia, Adam brings a rare mix of warmth, precision, and psychological depth to his work. He's also the UK's only certified facilitator of MindTime, a groundbreaking thinking styles model that helps people and teams communicate better, lower stress, and build real trust. Adam, absolute pleasure having you here today. Do you have a favorite quote or saying, sir?
I was really lucky as I was growing up. I went to a really prestigious school in South Africa, thanks to my mum, who thought it was important because at that time it was the only way to get a multiracial education. The head of the school was Bishop Desmond Tutu, who then became Archbishop. And Desmond was the most amazing guy, not how he was portrayed in the press, especially back then. He was really clear about what he thought his life's purpose was. The quote I love from him is, "Do your little bit of good where you are." It's those little bits of good put together that overwhelm the world.
And what's your tagline?
I base my business on kindness. My tagline is, because kindness isn't soft, it's smart. Training that changes culture.
Opera singing. That's quite a transition to leadership training. How did we go from good vocal expression to, hey, by the way, buddy, I got to do.
It's a crazy sort of rather erratic stagger of a career path, I know. So I've always sung. My whole life I sang. I had my first professional gig at the age of 5.5. I got paid like the equivalent of $2 to sing the opening verse of Once in Royal David City at some spectacular church. And so opera just seemed like a logical progression after school when I went to university. And I did a lot of opera and musical theatre for about 4 or 5 years full time. Transitions happened in South Africa and the theatre audience died. People wouldn't go out at night. They were scared. So we had no audience. I transitioned into education in South Africa and then in Scotland for about 20 years. And after those 20 years, I came to the conclusion that I loved training, educating, especially the pupils, but I didn't really like in that sector, which was the private sector, the parents so much. And so the parents can be very demanding. And sometimes they think that if you throw more money at a child, the child becomes more intelligent or more disciplined or just generally nicer. It doesn't really work like that. So I transitioned into restaurants, bizarrely, just to add another chapter. And for 10 years, I worked at amazing restaurants in London, a company called Corbin & King. Two of my really inspiring influences, Chris Corbin and Jeremy King, and they taught me a lot. And that's where I got into management and where I realized that having really good management pipeline from internal sources in any business is the key to longevity and a sort of an infinite progression of consistent management. And so being able to develop your managers internally is the key. And I really think that's a superpower for any business hoping to succeed. So that's how I went from opera all the way to management.
Interesting enough. So is a kitchen life normally as harsh as it seems from the different TV shows that show cooking, that where the chef is, how should we say, less tolerant for those surprises from the staff?
So on TV, the chefs are perhaps playing a character. Having met some, particularly that really vocal British chef who shall remain nameless, in their everyday lives, they are quite different. So they put on a persona for TV. That being said, you do see a broad range of management styles in kitchens, and busy kitchens are very stressful. The kitchens I really appreciated most were the kitchens where they were pretty much silent. The head chef on the pass at the front, orchestrating the whole operation. Some of our restaurants were serving 15, 16, 1700 people a day. So they were really, really busy operations. If the chef is fully in control and the kitchen is silent, everybody knows what they're doing because they're well prepared. They know what's coming up. They've been warned about the volumes of service level. Then it runs smoothly. You tend to only find shouting and screaming when things are going out of control.
Sounds like management. Well, you mentioned kindness being a strategy and that it changes things. I want to hear more, but I also want to hear if it's hard to deliver in a polarized society.
I believe that kindness is a superpower. There's a fantastic video online by Governor Pritchko at a commencement speech where he says that kindness is evidence of higher evolution because kindness takes a lot of thought. It's not passive. When we react emotionally, which is what we generally do when we're shouting and screaming, we're reacting from a threat response. Something's happened in our genetic sort of preservation, fight or flight mode. And it isn't like that. Kindness requires us to engage logical prefrontal cortex thinking. The cortex in the front is important to keep engaged in moments of stress. It takes guts to pause, to analyze, listen, and lead without your ego getting in the way. Kindness builds trust, and trust builds performance. And that's not soft. It's really hard, but it leads to huge structural and functional improvements.
I love your tagline, aspiring to inspiring. Can you tell me how that can change management styles?
When we start a management journey, generally we being promoted from within the team to supervising or managing the team. And it's a really tough transition. At that point, we aspire to be a good manager. And in management, leadership is all rolled up into the same package. People don't often get that to start with. That transition means we need to change the way we work, which is what a lot of managers don't do. They think that getting the promotion means they just do more of the same and work harder, do longer hours, and put in the graft. But what we really need to do is switch from being someone who is responsible for doing the work to someone who is responsible for the people who are doing the work. And that's why we have to, from aspiring to be a good manager, through this program, transition into inspiring the staff that we are managing and leading.
Are there myths that surround leadership from a small business? Like when someone's starting out and they go, I know how to make this widget, or I know how to talk to a client about what colors to paint on the wall, right? To have everything come together. But if they're working with a team or they have contractors or other service providers coming in and doing project management, they become a leader. What are the myths that most people have about leadership then? Where are the gaps?
The biggest myth that the young leaders have is that they have to have all the answers. They feel because they're now the leader and they've got this position either in their own business or because they've been promoted into it, that there's a pressure on them to always know what to do next, to always know what decisions to make. But actually, good leaders, really effective leaders, ask better questions. They create the space for others to shine and show what they are good at. They don't let their ego get in the way. And so the best leaders empower others rather than looking for the limelight themselves.
If you're hearing this instead of seeing this, you don't see the MindTime logo. And I'd love to know what it is, where it came from, and what makes it different.
The premise behind MindTime is all of us have a preferred thinking style. The logo has different colors in a triangular formation. The three extremes are blue, red, and green. We associate blue with future thinking, red with past thinking, and green with present thinking. And so that's this MindTime map, we call it, we can plot people's preferred thinking style, where they end up on the map. We all love a good map, don't we? And so we can plot where they end up on the map in terms of their thinking style, and it becomes really easy to understand what's going on. That's where the logo comes from. And of course, we don't expect people to be purely future or past or present thinkers. And that's why we need these blends and these other colors creeping into the logo.
From my experience in the corporate universe and talking to different people, everybody's got a different style of internal operating principles. Some people are down to the minor details. Some people have a large overview. And usually when they come in contact with someone who's the opposite, there tends to be stress because they're not jiving. How do you adjust the thinking style, especially when you have the need to have fine detail? You operate at that level versus another person goes, don't put me in the weeds. I just want to know the high level stuff. How do you reduce the stress levels in that type of environment?
So it's really important that you mention stress. I really think that stress is a huge factor, particularly at the moment. And then when you were mentioning polarization, and when we have these really even splits politically, ideologically, there is stress amongst a large proportion of the population. We've seen this play out in Poland again, just over the last few days. It's really interesting. What MindTime does is it firstly and most importantly improves our self-awareness about how we think, what we prioritize in terms of importance, and how comfortable we are with abstract versus concrete ideas. That person you referenced is very into detail, probably driven by a past thinking style, because they want to analyze against the evidence, all the facts. They want to gather information which is existing, so therefore it's in the past. They're very focused on detailed analysis and mitigating against risk. I'm a future thinker, incredibly abstract. I love coming up with new ideas, and I'm the worst person to work with as a past thinker, because I will constantly be pushing the boundaries and saying, oh, do you know what? I've just had another idea. Could we try this as well? And the past thinkers, I haven't even checked your last idea, and you've come with 3 more. That's really disruptive if you don't know your own thinking style. Now, of course, the poor present thinkers are really good at getting things done. They are the executors. They are waiting for the future thinkers who come up with ideas and innovate and create new ways of working. And the past thinkers who need to check those ideas and make sure they will work. And between them, they have to come up with this concrete plan to feed upwards to the top of the triangle for the executors, the present thinkers, to actually do. Thinkers don't care about ideation and they don't care about fact checking. They just want a clear plan of execution and what the metrics are to measure success. Most organizations, societies, corporations, any conglomerate of human beings tend to latch on to a really exciting, new, innovative idea and try to execute it immediately without checking. And that's going the wrong way, because these inspiring new ideas from future thinkers like me have to be checked. Otherwise, invariably, they don't land. And then trust is eroded and everybody gets frustrated because it seemed like such a good idea, but we couldn't get it to land. And past thinkers are left completely to their own devices to pick up the mess and try and make the sums work after the fact. And it's really stressful.
50 years ago or even more, you were in a community, often in a small town, and your grandfather gave you ideas about who you could trust, and so you believed them. Now, thanks to Zoom and the internet and social media and globalization, how do you build trust? How do you keep it from being eroded? And how do you remain cautious to be abused?
So there's various models I like to reference. One is the trust equation by Charles H. Green from The Trusted Advisor. It's a real classic. It's a fraction. And on the top, it talks about credibility. If you're going to build trust, you have to be believable. But then you also need reliability. Once you've said something, you have to do it. You have to deliver. And you have to have a level of intimacy, not romantic intimacy, but people have to know you as a person. They have to know bits and pieces of you as a human being to truly trust you. Managers often struggle with this because they worry about revealing too much. And therefore, their staff don't reveal much to them. In that kind of situation, we have low trust. Now, those three factors, the credibility, the reliability, and this knowledge, this intimacy, this getting to know people, are on the top of the fraction. So they all build trust. On the bottom of the fraction, there is self-interest. People who are selfish are never trusted. If we think someone is in it for themselves rather than the team or the company, we don't trust them. They may even be a top-notch performer. They might produce amazing results, but we may still not trust them because we know that if they got a better offer from another company or from another department, they'd be the first to jump ship and throw us under the bus. And so it's really important to know that these factors that drive trust are things that can be cultivated or indeed mitigated against. And so we need to know as leaders of people that we can build trust by actively analyzing what's going on.
How do you make that assessment, though? Is that a time and exposure thing between people? If you and I walked up right now and we're both having a drink at a bar or at a restaurant, we don't know each other, but we roll in and we go, hey, how's it going? We're at a business conference, for example. How do I become aware of that confidence to go, I can trust this person? What do you do? Is there some sort of checklist? Not to push back on a person, but go, do I partner with a person? Are we in sync? And because if you're looking at employees, right? Yeah, even hiring, when you go to hire somebody, is this person going to work out? How do you make that assessment? There's always a probability it can go sideways, but you feel there's going to be a strong probability that it's going to be a good working relationship.
So there's a lot at play here. Initially, we need to take on board that hiring decisions, or when we decide to enter into a new friendship or a professional relationship, are generally made within the first 50 to 30 seconds. It's a split-second reaction. Our brains are so fast at computing so many different factors. It could be how the person is presenting, are their gestures and the way they're saying the words actually matching with the words? Do they sound congruent? Is the body language really matching with what they're saying? Are they engaged with us? Instead of facing the bar and drinking their beer, are they turning around on that stool and engaging with us directly? Is there a chance of a connection? Bearing in mind that some people find that very difficult, particularly on the neurodivergent end of life. We need to take that into account. We need, through experience, to build up our understanding of people who are not in the big part of the bell curve and don't behave like we would expect them to, or according to our standards of behavior. But then, of course, there's a huge cultural thing. And this is probably jumping several points ahead. But as we have a more globalized workforce and people are working for different cultural entities around the world, we need to learn about this stuff. We need to understand what drives different people in terms of cultural expectations. We must not jump to conclusions about people's functionality in the language they're talking in. We must not jump to conclusions about, are they the right age or the right physicality or the right anything. We need to break it down to the basics. Does the person have the skills, or do they have the potential to learn the skills if I teach them? Would I like to interact with this person in the job that I'm hiring them for? Are they going to bring value? Are they going to be nice and a match for the team? And do I honestly think this person can take advice, take coaching? Are they prepared to admit they might be wrong? Those are the three factors. We did this in the restaurants a lot. Is this person's English functional enough to serve customers? Do they have enough skills to carry 3 plates without dropping them or spilling the sauce? And would I like to be served by them? Hire for will, train for skill.
Ooh, I like that. It even rhymed.
Well said.
Adam, one thing you mentioned earlier is that many people who were already in the company got into supervising and they were very good at getting stuff done. They were getting stuff off checklists. They may have been somewhat brusque possibly, or not aware of people management skills and how to really help people be their best. How do you work them through from going to a task version to a people version?
As we've mentioned, the shift from doing the job to being responsible for the people who are now doing the job is a really hard one. Mainly because you were really good at doing that job, and that's why you got the promotion. The problem with job descriptions is that most job descriptions, when you get promoted, list all of your new roles and responsibilities, but they never list what you should now leave behind, unless you need to do cover because of holidays or sickness. We understand that you're a manager. It's important for people to be clear about what a newly promoted member of staff is no longer responsible for, because that clears up space for them to focus on what's important. My training in what we call FATI, from aspiring to inspiring, is giving people these tools to be able to assess what needs to be done, delegate with confidence, and have this mindset shift of seeing the people they're responsible for as a multiplier of opportunities and things getting done, not an obstacle. And managers need to take on board that their biggest tasks are enabling their staff to do their jobs, which may be protecting them from other rapacious departments making onerous demands on them. It may be making sure that they have everything they need to do the job. And really importantly, leaving them alone to actually do the work instead of micromanaging them because you're feeling insecure as a manager.
How do you handle a micromanager? Like, assuming everybody wants a win scenario, you just have really bad habits, like micromanaging, always going, have you done this? Have you done this? It's almost like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? How do you guide them away from that micromanagement piece, other than a shock collar, which is probably not ideal?
Micromanagement creates stress and erodes trust. It presents the message to the staff that they are not trusted to do the job without close supervision. That itself is a demotivator versus coaching, which I advocate for. Feedback by its very nature is always negative. Micromanaging is multiple little injections of checking feedback. It's so much going on and on and on that it's really demotivating for the staff member. Now, what managers have to take on board are two really important factors. And these are based on science. They're based on research, multiple studies. Number one, increased stress reduces your functional IQ. The more stressed you are, the less able you are to use your intelligence. Your cognitive ability goes down when you're stressed. And so managers' primary function is not to stress their staff out, because otherwise they won't be able to work as well. Your line manager, your direct manager or supervisor, whatever the position is called, has more influence on your mental well-being than any other single factor in your life. Because you spend more time with them waking hours than you do with any other single person. Your line manager is really important for your mental well-being, and they can influence it negatively or positively. And managers need to take that on board.
You have Western leadership, let's say England and Europe, and then a different leadership set in Asia. You've been in both. What's been some of your takeaways?
So culturally, the really big differences are the way we build trust. It's more transactional in the West, and we tend to judge people on the last deal we did with them, the last project we worked on. Whereas in the Middle and Far East, it's very much based on relationships. How long have I known you? Did my father know your father? Did my uncle do business with your grandfather? Do we know each other? And there's more leeway for when things go wrong, because the trust is seen as a much longer process rather than, the last deal we did with you was a total mess. I don't trust you anymore. And so that's an interesting one. And the other one is hierarchical organization versus very flat organization, sort of democratic, collaborative organization. So very hierarchical structures like you might find in India, China, or Japan they find it very difficult to deal with, say, Scandinavian countries, where it's absolutely fine for a cleaner to come up with a good idea and speak to the CEO. It's not considered strange. Anybody can speak to any level in the company and no one gets offended. And so that difference between hugely hierarchical, very bounded by levels management structure is very different to a flat, more democratic management structure. So that's very difficult for people to take on board. In a hierarchical world, decisions are made by the boss and then implemented by the staff. But in a more democratic culture, decisions are made collectively and everybody takes responsibility for the outcome and the delivery. And that's very difficult if you come from the Philippines and you're working with people from the UK. You expect your boss to tell you what to do. But maybe in the UK, they become more democratic in the way they make decisions. They're expecting you to speak up in meetings, which you don't do because you're worried about losing face. And so there's so many dynamics at work when we work across multicultural organizations that we need to educate ourselves.
The way you're describing it, you can see that in military operations or military structure. You can see that in government structure. I remember one time here in the federal government, independent of which party's in play, the director or the senior director or whatever, as the person working the desk would never come up and say hi. There's like a boundary, a barrier. And I'm sitting there going, but why? How are you going to know if everything is running smooth? Unless, of course, your next layer down has a really good rapport, right? And you're getting a good feedback loop. You can't be everywhere all the time. How do you manage something where you can't give that honest feedback, or kindness, or even and I'm going a little farther afoot here. There is, in working in the hospital environment, they wanted the managers to go, getting a sense of baseline behavior from people, whether it was a patient or the staff. What's happening in your day? Is there anything you see that needs improvement? What are the tweaks? But it seems so mechanized as opposed to something that would flow. How do you go from one format to another format, especially if it's a large entity?
Firstly, we need to take on board that in really large entities, we've got to split the teams up into smaller sub-teams. Teams function much better when they're sort of between 6, 9, maybe 11 at the max, because then there's not too many social connections to maintain. There's research. It's called the Humanize Project at MIT, run by Alex Pentland. He's written amazing books on social dynamics. Teams need enough time to be able to communicate with every single member on the team. They need to be able to build up relationships. We can't have just a manager with people reporting into them, a triangular straight line from manager to each individual employee. It needs to be like a spider web. Everybody needs to be talking to everybody else. We can predict with absolute certainty which teams are going to be higher functioning if we look at their communication patterns. So people need to be comfortable speaking to everybody else on the team. It's really important. And I don't think that it means that feedback or giving feedback and coaching staff to improve needs to become embedded in everyday interactions. And it needs to happen in the moment. That old annual appraisal, which every manager panicked about for 2 weeks before because they hadn't done anything, and the staff were on edge because their annual bonus was dependent on the score they got. We all know that's not really the way we understand great businesses to be working at the moment. Great businesses give feedback in the moment continuously, and therefore it's not as loaded. And the feedback feels like a continuous process. It's more effective because if you observe something happening and give feedback about it immediately, or even better, you question how they felt about what was going on. You question what they think the likely outcome is going to be. You pull out information in a non-directive way rather than a critical way. Then you get feedback that feels like a gift. It still needs to be clear if things are going wrong or if they're business critical. And of course, in a medical sense, if they're life critical, it needs to be specific, but it needs to be focused on improvement and growth, not guilt. So we need to focus on the problem that needs solving rather than the person. That's really important. When we give feedback or enter into discussion, we've got to focus on the problem and solving it rather than the person. Because you build trust and made everybody feel safe to put up their hand when they don't feel they're coping or when they've made a mistake. You must model the behavior that you want your reports to use in their everyday reaction to feedback. So when a staff member brings you feedback, you can't shoot the messenger. You've got to pause, draw breath, and think about how to move this forward. If you don't model the behavior you're hoping to get from your staff, they are not going to respond positively. How managers react to feedback from their staff is what they're going to get as a reaction to their feedback. It's a two-way street. And if you're getting no feedback from your staff, if your staff are constantly saying everything's fine, I would suggest that it probably isn't. And they don't feel safe enough to tell you that there are things going wrong. There's great work by Professor Amy Edmondson at Harvard Business School, and she writes a lot about psychological safety. In her first study, when she was a research student, she was bamboozled by the fact that having sent researchers out into the field to research medical errors in a hospital context, the teams that they assessed as really high-functioning, friendly, happy teams to work in were reporting more errors. This seemed counterintuitive. And the teams that they thought were bad teams, using a team metric analysis, were reporting fewer errors. And this is where the whole concept of psychological safety started developing, because they worked out that the high-functioning teams actually felt safe enough to admit to those errors. The low-functioning teams were scared to say, I gave the wrong drug, or I gave the patient the wrong dosage. And so they end up hiding mistakes. This whole trust, psychological safety, feedback in the moment is so important for this transparent, open, mature adult conversation to be enabled and allow people to talk about what's really going on. If it's not going so great, then let's talk about it and fix it. And if it's going really well, let's celebrate it and analyze what's made it go really well so that we can replicate that in future projects.
You have a lot of thoughts on the first-time manager. There's the imposter syndrome. There's a false arrogance or a cockiness. There's a whole raft of personality traits that are quite dangerous. Can you talk about weaving through this journey?
The biggest advice I could give to any first-time manager is take on board that you're not alone. There are people around you who will help, but you've got to ask. Because if we have this cocksure, arrogant attitude that we've always got it all together, that's not what leadership is about. It's about being able to demonstrate that you are growing and you're helping other people to grow. It takes guts, especially younger male managers. When you ask them what's going on, they say, everything's fine. Do you know what you're doing? Yeah, I know. I've got it. They have. And you just need to check. You said, it's okay. You can come and talk to me. Sometimes, Bernie, it's good to go and have a drink in a low stakes environment away from work and talk these things through. It's about taking risks. It's about finding your own style. It's about experimenting a little bit, but then admitting when certain experiments don't go wrong. I always give my management trainees the option of using my name in vain. I say, listen, if you're worried about taking this back into the workplace and experimenting with it, just say, I've got this wacky trainer, Adam, and he suggested that I try this out. Do you mind if we do a little experiment? And if it doesn't work for you, just blame me. Just say, Adam suggested it didn't work, so I'm going to go and tell him. And then please come and tell me, and we'll work out a different way for you to approach it differently. You've got to find your own style. You've got to experiment when it goes wrong. And you've got to listen to your staff and say, I know this may seem strange. I know this is different to how we did it before, but can we try it? And then have a really adult-to-adult debrief about, was it better? Was it worse? What should we keep? What should we change? What should we start? What should we stop? And just progress it forward. Just progress it forward. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything on day one. How could you?
It made us aware of this pandemic where all of a sudden we're dealing with hybrid workplaces and remote workplaces and a reorg, and then coming back, and then we didn't come back, and then what should we keep and what should we throw away? What's your take on the relationships of these new environments?
So hybrid is here to stay. The tech has come enormously far. At the beginning of the pandemic, you couldn't buy a webcam. I had to buy a reconditioned one, which thankfully is really good and it works quite well. What we miss with the hybrid or remote workplace scenario is it's scary for some managers. Some managers find it very difficult to trust their staff if they can't see them working in front of them. And that's something we've got to work through. That perhaps some measurement metric models like KPIs are no longer as relevant as, for instance, OKRs, outcomes and key results. If someone is working from home and they are producing work at the right quantity and the right quality within the time frame, doesn't matter if they do some of the work very early before the kids come up and some of the work after they've got them off to school, and then they take a break to walk the dog, and then they might do some afternoon homework, feeding, go to the sports match or the training session with the kids, and then they do a bit more work in the evening. Does it matter that they're not working a true 9 to 5? I don't think so anymore. It gives a lot of people some enormous flexibility. The struggle for the manager, of course, is there some front-facing roles that cannot work hybridly. And so how do you keep it fair? I work a lot with local government. A bin man collecting garbage cannot work hybridly. The garbage ain't going to happen. But somehow we've got to make it fair for him and fair for the person who gets to work at home as well. So that's really difficult. Ultimately, however, what is the biggest challenge in terms of hybrid is we've lost what we used to call water cooler moments. And so what Alex Pentland's studies showed us is that the most important type of communication in any team is actually the communication that happens outside formal meetings. The stuff that happens when there isn't a formal agenda, the stuff that happens while we're walking to the car park, or in the old days when we were having a cigarette under the whatever oak tree, or I inappropriately say that in these very woke days, the gentlemen have lost out on all going to the bathroom and standing next to each other. Amazing amount of negotiation used to happen in the bathroom at the trough. And the ladies, of course, don't wear as much lipstick anymore. So they're not putting their lipstick on in the mirrors. And I know this is totally non-PC, but the bottom line is we've lost those little tangential chance meetings, making a coffee in the canteen together, having lunch together, the lift club, or catching the same bus into work. And somehow, because they are so important, we've got to reverse engineer that back into the hybrid workplace. If you're sitting at home and you are scheduling back-to-back meetings from the time your commute used to start until the time your commute ended, you are not only working more hours, but you're probably not getting up from your desk, not going to the bathroom enough, not drinking enough water, and definitely not interacting in an informal way with your colleagues in between meetings. And that is to our detriment, both physically in terms of health, definitely mentally in terms of mental health, and in terms of effectiveness, because that's when the important little reminders, the quick, can you have a catch up? How are you getting on with that project? It's really important. And so we've got to reverse engineer it somehow. You offer such a great service through your East Tradewinds podcast, for instance, because you offer a chance for people to virtually just have a low stakes, no stakes chat and to catch up with like-minded people. And this is what we've got to do. We've got to build in the virtual world what we used to have in the real world, because otherwise we're going to fall apart.
Adam? Wow. So if someone says, hey, wow, how do they reach you? And what areas do you serve?
Online, anywhere. with notice and subject to scheduling and transport requirements, I can train anywhere in the world. I try to allow myself a little bit of recovery time if there's a massive time difference, because it's important. But I do a lot of work online. I do a lot of work in person. They can reach me through my website, which is adamkirkaldy.com. They can reach me through LinkedIn. I use my name, and they can reach me through yourselves, I'm sure, when they listen to the podcast. Hopefully, I'm sure you will be happy to hand them on and to pass on their details to me or my details to them.
I want to say to you, Adam, thank you. Appreciate your time today. And to Wayne being the co-host, but more importantly, you, the Knack for Business listeners. Because, if this has resonated with you, this will solve a lot of your problems. Because Adam here will help emerging managers. So you're just starting out. You can express kindness. It doesn't mean you're a pushover. It doesn't mean you're wishy-washy. It just means you're getting a good business relationship and you're getting good results. So reach out to Adam if you're kind of wondering, it's not been working out for me in the past. Or have your managers or have your bosses reach out to Adam and set up a time.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVINSIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner. And Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.